Simulation and Gaming Conference. We're going to get ready for our next presentation.
Our next presenter is Kevin Taylor. Kevin Taylor is an assistant professor in Computer Animation and Game Development program at California State University. He has created work for publishers such as Bethesda, Sega, Activision, and Konami, and he teaches courses over digital modeling, concept art, storyboarding, animation, CGI, studio production, and he's a passionate educator. He's taught in Europe, Australia, and around America. Engaging in his PhD, his research interests include augmented reality, 2 and 3D animation, and comic book development. So let's throw it over to Mr. Taylor.
Hello and welcome. My name is Kevin Taylor and I'm a professor of computer animation and game development at California State University. I'm a long-time artist and creator with a background in games development and comics, and I've begun my PhD candidacy in transmedia narrative development, which will be the focus of my presentation today. I'm going to provide you with a brief background on my experience before moving into an explanation of my study, the issues it will address, and the different technical and creative methods that will be applied. I've worked as an academic for a number of years, at institutions in England, Australia, and different states across the US. Professionally, I worked as a game developer in the UK for a company called Rebellion Games Liverpool, developing titles for publishers such as Sega, Konami, Ubisoft, Bethesda Softworks, and others. We developed for franchises such as Call of Duty and Aliens vs Predator, where I worked on products as a level lead artist, a trainer for in-house and international outsourced teams. Training new artists was something I found deep enjoyment in, and my desire to follow my passion for research and new media storytelling led me from production to academia. Over the last few years, I've been engaged in the research and development of AR narrative experiences. As a published comic book artist and Comic-Con exhibitor, I developed an original 130-page graphic novel or 5-issue comic. A phone application was developed that, when pointed at designated pages, would run an original animation to the page, which gains an appearance of a TV screen with content limited only to the imagination of how it could be used. This work encompasses an experimental story based on unions of George R.R. Martin's top-down and Tolkien's bottom-up world development techniques. The story is a union of historical timelines, varied religious and cultural folklore, packed into a contemporary narrative utilizing Jungian archetypes and story systems, such as Christopher Vogler's hero's journey. This is one piece of what is set to be a narrative conveyed on a range of platforms, a transmedia development. It will seek to utilize its disparate components to garner strong, precise responses tailored to improve the impact and clarity of cross-media experiences, honed through subsequent feedback. Research has shown that the stronger the atmosphere conjured by a piece of work, the more visceral the reaction and the more engaged users become. As a fan of storytelling in atmospheric virtual spaces, suspense and horror are seen to elicit the strongest environmental responses, and have been seen to be one of the most successful in the application of spatial reaction in technologically immersive stories. This work, and the goals I sought to achieve, were accepted as the basis of my PhD candidacy, in which I am currently engaged. So what is the goal of my research? The goal of my work is not to revolutionize the field, but to improve a user's transmedia entertainment experience, define new workflows, theories, practice, and considerations that can be applied by future developers to improve results. Building atop of my interest for sequential art, illustration, and graphic novels, my work will seek to focus on improving the field of cross-platform experiences between printed visual narratives and augmented reality. While the work will branch out into other fields, particularly for prototyping in VR, it's expected that this study will inform larger areas of transmedia production. What is the problem that I'm seeking to address with my work? Currently, AR trails behind VR as a consumer-ready product. Its mobile nature relies on the world for interaction, has greater potential for benefits, but it's also a greater step from the core of current digital entertainment than other screen mediums. This includes cinema, TV, phones, and VR, which is essentially a 360-degree monitor. The most successful AR experiences to date is Pokemon Go, which was released in 2016. The fandom was at its height, and the nature of hunting and tracking Pokemon was fully embodied by the game, which required the user to physically track them using their phones, move to their location, and finally attempt to put them in a ball. Team aspects encouraged collaboration, and there was a mostly positive movement of fans that were engaged within the community in keeping with the aspects of the series' team dynamic. Most AR experiences rely on pre-established stories for user connectivity to the story. Just as with Pokemon Go, the stories themselves are relatively thin, with users bringing most of the knowledge of the world, its characters and rules to the game world prior to play. Stories, even in the most well-funded products, with little to no success as storytelling content, with AR games bringing little to nothing that technically or narratively builds upon the uniqueness of the platform for new narrative experiences. Independent and large studio developers who have published transmedia comic books with AR accompaniment fall into the same pit of negligence, favouring gimmickry over innovation, with pop-up book style accompanying animations that seek to add nothing to the experience that can't be seen on the page, let alone taking the user deeper into the narrative. They will add new knowledge to my field in the design, development and implementation of new paradigms for design, theory and practical methodologies that will be of benefit to the progression of the field. As a practice-based PhD, the road to these achievements will be laden with prototypes, experimentation, conferences and literary review. Products will provide examples of how goals are achieved in the application of new theory, with game engines utilised to theorise new experiences in transmedia storytelling that would not be easily achievable outside of advanced simulations. Existing methods of cross-media principles are being explored, with the goal of these methods distilled, merged with new concepts, and prototyped to explore new means of transmedia engagement. New stories are being scripted that facilitate experimentation in order to identify design improvements towards the use of AR animations to facilitate a depth of transmedia experience. Scenarios of narrative interest that provide options for AR narrative engagement are highlighted as potential AR target scenes. These scenarios receive additional early concepting, scripting, and design to facilitate a relevant deepening of the user experience by expanding the story, and the context of actions and events within the story when the AR animations are activated. It could include an exploration of differing viewpoints, internal monologues, reminiscence, views of other scenes, and many more. In this way, frameworks for the creative psychological considerations, technical decision-making, and practical methodologies will be established as rule sets to provide structure for future productions of this nature. For example, the need to devise tangent stories that cover more than one character's actions when a page is augmented, the development of subplots, or the design of inner or psychological conflicts that can be better woven into the fabric of an augmented story. For new experiences of psychological drama and narrative conflict are limited only by the imagination. In this way and others, AR will be better prepared for augmenting the narrative experiences of graphic novels beyond what they can offer alone. Over the course of years, my work will seek to address this core issue and sub-issues in my field. The study providing new knowledge to the field that act in some small way to improve it. As everyone knows, a new project begins with research and brainstorming. The foundations of my study involve the exploration of a large body of different tools and methodologies in the design of new practice, and outlining how my current and future skills can be applied to the benefit of this practical work. Concepts for practical development and prototyping are guided by literary review, conferences, and engaging with my peers in academic and professional circles. This includes literature on story design and the psychology of user engagement from authors such as Vogler and Butcher, of new books on new media storytelling practices and the relationships between users and digital narratives. Conference attendance through the Augmented Reality and Virtual Reality Association, or the ARVRA, provides a large body of current theory and practice in the field, with the internet providing the most current thoughts on a lot of this content. There are a range of resources if you're willing to put the time in, particularly the Game Developer Conference in San Francisco's GDC Vault. If you can't attend, and I strongly recommend you do, then you can watch some of the fantastic presentations from industry professionals the world over. This study will evolve and continue to inform the direction of my practical production, which will utilise 2D, 3D, VR and AR toolsets to achieve my goals. The eventual goal of my practical work is exhibition, with interactive installations in a gallery space allowing the user to engage with printed, augmented and virtual reality narratives within a storytelling space. The lead up to this will rely heavily on focus groups, utilised to analyse the effectiveness of different theories and prototyped productions. Emotional factors of the experience, as well as practical factors of usability and engagement, will be identified, highlighting best practices within new theories and methodologies. What makes this study relevant right now? On-screen is one example of a cross-media story, with products such as this leaving critics wondering what part of this transmedia storytelling experience is advanced by the augmentation of the media. Does it deepen the story? Does it present new ideas or information that make a scene more emotionally impactful or characters more relatable through its augmentation? Unfortunately, the answer is that many of these cross-media products exist simply because they can. An uninspired use of the tools sees narrative interest failing to adequately utilize the medium to make the experience worthwhile. This begins with developers seeking to apply existing paradigms to the new medium, often in an attempt to quickly monetize user interest in the technology rather than exploring and devising new methods and practice to further the field. In AR comics, this can be seen to be the case from indie studios and larger studios like DC on high-profile IPs such as the Batman. A reliance on technology to garner interest is gimmickry, and an excess of this will lead to a waning consumer interest in all products of this nature. It can have a detrimental effect on a fledgling industry, stifling the success of creative products that are lost in the milieu, with the potential to crash a field altogether. An example of this would be the 1983 video game console crash in the United States, which killed off the national industry to pave way for the well-made and designed products from Japan. But maybe next time there won't be a Japan to prop up the industry. Theories, paradigms, and methodologies provided by my study and practical works has the potential to assist in some small way to offset this, providing basic principles for the goals that should be achieved, augmentation of narrative print mediums. Let's look a little closer at some of the tangible practices to be addressed. Growth in VR is slow, but consistent. The technology remains a far shot from being accepted as a household means of media entertainment, but strong products have emerged that tout the benefits of VR engagement. For VR and AR to achieve their potential, producers need to define unique experiences for the tools rather than largely utilizing existing cinematic principles in new media productions. That isn't to say that developers aren't doing exciting, creative productions with the tools, only that the approach they're utilizing is based too rigidly on the frameworks of current and past media forms. One example would be the work of the company CineVR, who create 360-degree features to tell specific stories. I'm a fan of this company and their work, and on screen we can see a really interesting piece of VR storytelling developed in the assessment of how existing practices should be changed to suit the new medium. During discussions on this and other projects the companies developed, they identified aspects of existing cinematic practice that are deemed unusable in VR, the door on their functions as was noted as standard industry practice. Let's look a little closer at this. For anyone like myself who enjoys theatre and cinema, they provide unique and separate visual experiences, and the unadulterated nature of most theatre performance is what makes them a pleasure. Our productions have been looking largely to theatre, more than cinema, for their methods in developing VR and 360-degree narrative experiences. Considerations include requirements for static camera viewpoints, for all actors to perform as if on screen at all times, lighting and sound rigs, amongst other considerations. I've engaged with a lot of experiences of this like, with many redundant of interest. 180 degrees of the experiences simply exist as dead space, with some 360-degree visuals limited to 90 degrees of actual interest, which is crazy. One may even wonder if such productions were jumping on a bandwagon, wanting to be a part of the technology without knowing how the work would benefit from its use, essentially creating experiences that offer nothing more than their 2D framed media counterparts. The ongoing lack of definitive rule sets for transmedia storytelling, specifically as it pertains to augmented reality, can leave teams working with methodologies that limit inspiration, as opposed to developing improved practices unique to and informed by the mediums themselves. This isn't to say I see myself as a Leif Erikson discovering the new world with my research, but I believe that through setting out to study and explore the unknown corners of practice with no financial directive to pull study in one direction or another, new concepts can and will be discovered, allowing me to add a brick, stones, or even just some mortar to the wall of new knowledge in my field. While most of these new concepts remain to be uncovered in the practical progression of my work, I've identified a range of existing production practices, script and design methodologies that are outdated and unusable for AR and VR. One is the cinematic camera, or more precisely, the goals of specific shots that are deemed lost in 360-degree theatrical production in VR. Within a stage theatre production, it's nigh on impossible to utilise the spectrum of cinematic tools and shots to further the narrative. The close-up shot, for example, used to convey the emotions of a character and create a deeper sense of connectivity between character and audience. When developing a 360-degree virtual reality production, having to naturally navigate the actor to a close proximity with the camera at the very moment a close-up is required to serve cinematic goals is overly problematic for obvious reasons, especially as the viewer is playing a disembodied observer, not a character in most VR productions. In fact, the Cine VR team and other 360 production houses believe that a VR close-up shot is jarring, uncomfortable, and generally disconcerting, leaving this valuable shot considered defunct in modern 360-degree productions. As this and other blockages are encountered, I've observed that many creatives place barriers and seek other paths around these issues, with less exploration of new means to transverse these issues and achieve goals of cinematic practice in unique ways to the medium. Such rule sets are established, they're hard to shake off. They mire the new technology and old concepts and hamper the development of new and exciting principles that realise the true potential of the individual medium. This frame of mind is known as the imitation phase of development, and it is historically common within new mediums. The excessive use of old language and concepts derived from other mediums can stifle a platform's progress, and the longer this continues, the more ingrained developers become in using existing practices for the new platform. This phase sees producers devising rule sets for AR and VR storytelling based on current cinematic standard, deciding what works and what does not based on cinematic production principles. This approach has seen important emotive shots, such as the close-up shot, deemed inaccessible for VR storytelling and stricken from the usable repository of 360-degree cinematic shots by most developers. This is an exceptionally common approach to producers tackling a new emerging medium. But when one reflects on the early days of theatre and cinema, it's evident that the application of pre-established paradigms slows the advancement of the medium, which must work all the harder to shake off the comfortable concepts that have been utilised. I was engaged with the African Dysphoria and AIDS Network in 2017 when they contacted my university for assistance in the planning of a project. I was working at Webster University at the time, and the multimedia goals of the project saw me brought on board as an advisor. The AIDS epidemic in Africa is a major concern, and they felt that the people with AIDS were identified by the disease, with their individualism and stories lost. Working internationally with the team, we designed a product that would bring these people to the fore of the discussion within a VR experience that would utilise captured footage and interactive systems to allow users to travel around Africa, hearing from the individuals themselves, with the eventual move to America, where the ongoing AIDS crisis continues mostly outside of public perception. This was an engaging project and really opened my eyes to the potential for real-world influence of interactive experiences. Any avid gamer has doubtless been touched by the trials and tribulations of their characters within a story, and interaction as a platform for engaging a user within a story is of unparalleled potential. While I don't expect my study to land with a bombshell, I strongly believe that addressing the failings of producers to advance the storytelling experiences in the AR accompaniment of intrinsically narrative print mediums has the potential to facilitate future stories that could. I'm very excited to expand my theoretical and practical knowledge, exhibiting final work as games, comics, and animations within the storytelling space of a tailored exhibition. Around this time, I'd also contribute to a collective publication on the cultural impact of gaming, specifically writing on the 1993 Senate hearing scandal of mature gaming warping young minds through games such as Mortal Kombat and Night Trap that led to the creation of the ESR board that has facilitated the growth of gaming into the modern, mature platform we all enjoy today. My work in this area contributed to my travelling to Japan a few years ago to present at a conference. There I spoke about the potential for games as a means of positive mental health. Production will hopefully elicit engaging experiences with the potential to touch users on an emotional level through the stories facilitated by the technology. Research will see the conceptualization and realization of new means of narrative user engagement, which will require ethical evaluation and a lot of feedback from peer groups. Anyone wishing to test out alpha state comics and augmented reality apps, please get in touch for some game testing experience. A field I started out in myself as a game tester for Sony when I graduated many moons ago from my BA. This study is a practice-based project, meaning that while my research and theoretical studies will guide my work, a significant portion of my PhD will be in the furthering of my creative skills through content that realizes my research goals. This will be based on my experience as a storyteller, artist, and game developer, and I plan to put my broad range of production experience and creative interests to work. In the following slides, I'm going to discuss those areas, with examples of practical work and a discussion of what I have or will use them for directly in my study. Advancing the nature of storytelling through technical cross-media narratives requires a strong body of storytelling knowledge, and the many rules therein for these rules to be bent, broken, and re-envisioned. There is a strong psychology of story and its innate connection to the human condition, and everyone is a storyteller in one way or another. As a species, there is a common core of how we respond to aspects of the world, be it joyous or fearful, that has seemed to be consistent since the earliest stories. Lives are faced by trials that we must grow to overcome, a tale as old as humanity that is known as the monomyth. And this is seen historically the world over, irregardless of location. This core of fundamental storytelling practice is well represented by writers such as Joseph Campbell and Christopher Vogler, who laid down solid narrative structure and insights referenced in most, if not all, large narrative productions. I'm currently in discussion with John Butcher, the president of the Joseph Campbell Foundation in LA, who has continued Campbell's legacy of story innovation in his explorations of virtual reality. And we're in discussions regarding his participation in an AR storytelling course looking to get approved for next summer. As a tool for storytelling, pre-production methods are of a major importance to the visual communication of a story. The pre-production process, when well implemented, should stimulate understanding and discussion within a production team, problem solving and removing significant roadblocks in a project before they're even an issue. The process of storyboarding from a script provides a production team with a visual framework from which to make decisions and changes. Here, a solid understanding of camera shots, composition, lighting, framing, and a range of other elements are discussed and defined for a project before a camera even needs to be touched. 2D art is fast and malleable, and simple mark making as a means of communicating a range of ideas can be invaluable. This is where my work on this project, and pretty much every other project that I've ever engaged with, has begun, as concepts roughed in sketches and notes, formed into a sequence via storyboards or thumbnails, and adjusted into the emotional tone and goals of the story until they are clear. The use of design tools such as cinematic graphs can be valuable in visualizing different aspects of a motion media story from start to finish, and Bruce Bloch's The Visual Story should be read by anyone looking to gain an understanding of cinematic methods like this. When a storyboard is approved, content can advance to the next stage of pre-production. For comics, this is the drafting of pages, with considerations regarding visual flow, tempo, and mood specific to dynamism and composition explored. For motion media, an animatic could be created, much like that seen on screen. Here, rudimentary animations are created from 2D sketches, animated with a focus on timing, motion pacing, and visual composition. These approaches are invaluable in this project, and with a lot of questions answered and identified even before the onset of developing prototypes. These days, my programming skills are primarily limited to Unreal node systems, but my investigation and testing of fringe tools and technologies has touched on advanced fields of AI-generated content. Initial forays have included the Promethean AI tools, which, through voice commands, can create and manipulate fully cluttered 3D environments, based on user-generated asset collections. The potential of this tool, and for AI-assisted 3D generation in general, is limitless, with the concept of 3D artists acting as directors over developers, touching on the science fiction future of interactive production that is very, very exciting. Studies at Nvidia, known for their graphics cards, has expanded into AI neural networks, or deep learning networks. On screen you'll see an example of a 3D world that exists without a single manually produced 3D element. Instead, the 3D space is generated based on driving test video footage of cities fed into the network, with time spent educating the network on what it's seeing: a car, building, pedestrian, etc. From there, the network generated a completely unique 3D space that was fed into the Unreal Engine and navigated just like a video game. With real-world AR augmentation already operable, the future onset of AI spatial generation and advanced neural networks for the complete augmentation of real-world spaces is only a matter of time. Expectation is that this will extend to fully themed 3D worlds. Why walk to work through your shitty neighborhood when you can walk to work through a medieval settlement or cyberpunk future? Currently, AI-assisted animation tools have been identified as those most directly related to my work, with current prototyping showing promise in improving methods of traditional animation for cinematic production. Tools are far from consumer standard, with a high learning curve seeing more issues than directly positive results. There's clear potential here that my study will explore through experimentation, testing, and community engagement. Working in both 2D and 3D mediums, video editing and production have always been a large part of my work. Projects are made or broken on the editing room floor, and while an animatic helps to avoid issues, a finished cut of footage will always come with its own surprises that require assessment and problem solving. Unions of video footage, animated 2D and 3D content are commonplace, and composite video editing is one of the most common forms of seeing this union realized to its full potential. This process, working with layers of footage, sees aspects shown and hidden from one layer to the other within a confined drawn space, forming an illusion of a visual union of elements in one location, allowing imposed aspects to blend seamlessly in front or behind of objects that sit within the real world scene. Currently, I've been utilizing this in the creation of aspects of the animated content for AR. On screen is an example of a Snapchat filter that I quickly created to allow me to act with the face of a character from the footage, creating my own face reference that was then utilized in drawn rotoscoped animation as well as directly within the work. No technology is off the table in this transmedia study, and I've cast a wide initial net of exploration. This has included the study of new approaches to rigging and character generation, made easier through current phone technologies that include 3D depth scanning for new heights of 3D image capturing. Completing various approaches to development that realize final productions from inception through to implementation, highlighted methodologies that will prove valuable during future prototyping, particularly as it pertains to facial capture to the benefit of animation aspects of the project. Much of my cinematic experience has been based in the creation and direction of 3D animated content. 3D animation has a technical core, with models and skeletal rigs required to bring the motion to life. Above that sits the vital creative components: character, atmosphere, and story. Animation isn't only used for the creation of 3D animated content. Studios commonly utilize 3D animation for the pre-visualization phase of a cinematic project, as a means of taking complex action scenes from animatic to an approved screen experience. Software exists to take video footage and convert it directly into motion capture data, though the success of these tools is currently less than 100%. As these inevitable advancements approach, storytellers who are informed and prepared will be ready to ride inspiration to unique storytelling experiences in visual mediums, allowing individual developers more control over a project that would have once required a much larger team. In this way, I seek to create content beyond that which may be currently expected of a PhD candidacy of this nature. Traditional animation practices have been built upon motion footage for a long time, with live action used as animation guides in a process called rotoscoping. These processes have seen advancements to facilitate new and exciting unions between them, with shows such as undone cell-based animation systems utilised to create an exciting exploration of one character's fleeting sense of reality. In my own work, I've been experimenting with these practices, utilising the aforementioned AI-assisted tools for art generation. This is a fledgling field, but the promise offered merits ongoing investigation, and I believe the benefits to animation could be profound. I'm very interested to see where this study will go, specifically in this direction. Vector animation tools such as Toon Boom Harmony have shown great success in the creation of 2.5D visuals that appear 2D but have the increased fidelity of 3D production pipelines, with 2D characters rigged to a 3D skeletal setup for increased initial work, offering massive time benefits during later animation production. This is a tool that I'm currently learning and eager to apply within my augmented reality animation work. Techniques like these provide opportunities to take stories beyond the corporeal into the fantastical, with animated storytelling achieving stronger results within smaller and smaller budgets and teams. On-screen are elements from my portfolio that can be found on my website. This shows 3D models created from conceptual design and photo reference. This is a field where I have a lot of professional experience and is currently envisioned for use in my virtual reality storytelling, the VR simulations of advanced AR features, and for AR projection of 3D storytelling elements within the real world. I will be applying some of the many different approaches to 3D production within my work, each with different pros and cons depending on the purpose and use of content. As a 3D environmental artist by trade, methods of modular environmental construction playing off real-world architectural and construction principles and considerations remain relevant, particularly with the onset of procedurally generated 3D environments from modular seeds. This process sees expansive environments built from mathematical sets of prefabricated structures that don't rely on manual rearrangement for spatial generation. While more advanced real-world 3D environmental reconstruction through AR tracking is beyond my programming abilities, additional creation of VR simulations that allow a user within a digital fabrication of the real world to engage with fanciful AR designs will explore how this future could appear, and the new technical, creative, and ethical considerations therein. Game engines are not innately systems for video game creation. Instead, they are interactive platforms that can be utilised to create experiences by the design of the development team. I've used a range of proprietary and consumer engines for the creation of different products, utilising constantly shifting in-house proprietary tools to the polished engines freely available for non-commercial use. On screen is a fly-through animation I created to test out video capture animation tools, the latest rigging practices, and VR scene development, VFX, spatial audio, and other aspects of practice. The video, featured on my website, was themed into a fan film based on my 3D reconstruction of the San Francisco docks, titled Fallout Pacific Coast. Trademark pending. I'm only kidding, don't sue me, Bethesda. Other approaches will be utilised for spatial storytelling in AR and VR, including the recording of 360-degree video capture with actors working to scripts and recorded content applied in a range of what I hope will be technically and creatively interesting fashions. The majority of these pursuits began or continue through the small press publishing house I created as an avenue to distribute my content, and out of my own personal love of storytelling and conventions. With growing potential for new productions and dwindling time, connectivity with international developers and artists has grown into a positive creative collective, with the sharing of experience and ideas along with creative collaboration. One example would be the Ophidian comic book series, which I created over a number of years. This is where I continue to explore my new experimental concepts in tandem with my theoretical studies. Illustrators have contributed art, colour work, editing, and even programming to productions within the comic and in some of the many peripheral tests, such as with AR posters, stickers, and even physical AR tattoos. While many products are complete, they aren't actually available outside of our testing teams at this time. Anyone interested in contributing or collaborating should head to the website and get in touch through the contact section. With most large conventions seeing well over 100,000 entries, we do expect to get some fantastic feedback from the community that we're going to apply directly back into our creative and technological works. And with that, my presentation draws to a close. Thank you very much for listening, guys. I'm happy to take questions now, or you're welcome to contact me later via the website or via the email on screen. Goodbye.
So, Kevin, thank you for that talk. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Are you getting any feedback from my end?
No, we can hear you. So, that talk, do we have any questions from the audience? Any questions at all? I think one of the first questions, like if somebody wants to get into these fields, what do you suggest their first avenue to be?
Right, to get into, goodness, I mean, I touched on a few fields there, but I think the first thing you've got to do is you have to be passionate, and then you have to begin your research. If you want to be a developer, then develop small things, develop things that you wouldn't show off to anyone. Really get your hands dirty, get some experience, continue researching and trying to engage with the community, and you're going to grow your experience and you're going to grow your network, and hopefully you'll be able to leverage that into an opportunity where you're engaging with something interesting, and you can leverage that into more and more kind of projects, and hopefully some money for a paid career as well.
All right, another question would be, we have a lot of people who are more on the art side of things, and you're back with the comic book art and stuff. So somebody who's not necessarily technically inclined and wants to add the interactive AR elements, is there a tool or a pathway that they can get started with taking their own art and making it interactive?
Goodness, I mean, not that I'm aware of. I did some investigation. There's companies such as iJack, and they charge quite a bit of money for this. This is why I kind of went international, and I had someone build, aspects of the system for me based on my own art and design, because you need a content management system online, and that kind of connects the visual artwork that you want to project from to the actual video animation footage that you want to relay through. And if you want to do any kind of pop-out AR work, where things are jumping out to the page, then you need a designated developer in an interactive engine like Unity or Unreal Engine to actually code that to kind of work within the systems and to get that kind of targeted and matched up correctly. And that all of those reasons is why I kind of decided to build my own system, the Imperator AR system, and we're currently testing that for rollout kind of later this year. So I'm sorry that there's not a better answer for that, really. You can certainly download apps that will allow you to do smaller things, like you can import an object and you can project an object on a 3D surface in the world. But if you want to create any kind of cohesive comic book with attached films and audio and all of that stuff, you're really going to have to kind of dig into a little bit of programming really there in an interactive engine.
All right, any other audience questions? Oh, yeah.
It seems like there's multiple groups of people that have to do each discipline. How do you collaborate on a transmedia property?
All right, so the question is that there's a lot of different people working on these types of projects. So how do they collaborate on these transmedia projects?
Managerial issues are always going to be a bit of a problem, especially when I'm working across time zones. So my in China, so he's always 12 hours ahead of me. It's going to be a little problematic. We've got this small window where we're both cohesive enough to get some work done. And so there's a lot of emails. In all honesty, I do the majority of the managerial aspects, kind of bringing people in. So I'm the point person for, actually implementing the work, and I do a lot of the kind of the community outreach as well, because I've worked around the world, so I'm lucky enough to know artists and developers in lots of different locations who are keen to do some kind of fun stuff on the side. Like one of the reasons I left the industry is that when you sign a contract in any creative work, the develop yourself independently is essentially owned by the company through the contract, just to make sure you're not stealing any concepts or ideas, and that was a little too restrictive for me. So I know a lot of people who are willing to do a little work on the side and are kind of keen to get involved and do small creative projects kind of internationally. So that can help. Managerially, just a lot of documentation, a lot of discussion. And any kind of problem solving that needs to be done, you just find some time for, a chat like this, or you exchange some emails, really.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? We'll go over here.
With that, the generated room that was shown in the earlier presentation, I assume that was like a bunch of different pre-made models that were being put into that room. What size an asset library would you need to expect that?
All right, so there was in your presentation you had a generated room, and so the question was that they were assuming that you had some sort of asset library to create that, and what size asset library would you need to generate that?
That's a great question. I think you're kind of talking about some of the Promethean AI experimentations that are going on at the moment. Honestly, you can feed as much content into that system as you like. It's really just a matter of applying essentially hashtags. Hashtag 80s, hashtag chair, hashtag this, hashtag that. And it's able to kind of look through its repository and understand, based on the hashtags, what kind of works within a scene, and it can kind of implement all of that from there. The size of the library, because the stuff that isn't actually utilized doesn't add anything to the physical size of the space. The library can be of infinite size, essentially. So the more kind of content you do, the larger it can get. As a general rule, so you're building a scene with, 15 notable objects, bed, chair, that kind of thing, cupboard. You want at least that or double that with regard to clutter objects, posters, small aspects and items around the room. So 10 or 15 objects should be met with 25 to 30 aspects of clutter. There's no limit to the size of the repository, and there's no real limit to what it can create, essentially, which I think is going to do a lot of good with regard to X referencing in future products such as Skyrim or whatever. More buildings, more houses, and they're automatically generated. You don't need to kill a designer, just spending his days building these same spaces over and over again with slight differences, because a system will be able to do that for you, and then the artist comes in, the animator comes in, designer comes in, and adjusts it from there to make it look a little bit better.
And I think we have one more question.
I realize it may be difficult to predict how things may be in the future. So I was wondering how you imagine things being on the programming side for video games and computer simulations 4 to 6 years from now.
Oh, okay. So the question is, how do you imagine this, in the future? How is it going to expand, especially on the programming side of things? What are we looking at, in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, we're going to see aspects of this beginning to bleed into kind of primary production through studios. In the next 10, you're going to have, games and interactive products that are using, a lot of games and interactive products that are going to be using these kind of deep learning networks and AI-assisted production. It's not going to get rid of the need for 3D artists. It's not going to get rid of the need for animators, programmers, because we provide the creative eye for all of this stuff. We bring that X factor that is really needed to make sure it's done well. And as these systems are used to create larger and larger environments, because that's what people want. They want worlds that are just getting bigger and bigger that they can put thousands of hours into. It's going to mean that there's still a need for these large teams. So as the games grow and as the games use automation, you're really not going to see a drastic kind of drop in positions and jobs that are going to be available in the industry. At least that's what I kind of expect based on what I've kind of gleaned from the way the industry is kind of reacting to this at the moment.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time today. Let's hear a round of applause from our audience here. All
Thank you
right.
very much, guys. It was a pleasure. Take
All
care, everyone.
right, thank you.